Hey everybody, welcome back to the channel. My name is George Herrera with the Queens Home Team at Keller Williams Realty. Now in today's video, I'm talking about final walkthroughs and what you should look for or things that you should do when you go to your final walkthrough. If you're in the market to buy or if you're planning to buy in the future, once you get all the way towards the end of the process, so this is after you got an approval from the loan, from the bank, after you got your commitment, once you're clear to close, one of the last things that you do before actually going to the closing table is arranging for the final walkthrough. The purpose of the final walkthrough is where you go to see the property again and you make sure that the property is in the same condition as it was when you first saw it. Also, when you go to the final walkthrough, you want to make sure that everything is in working order. So unless you're buying a foreclosure or something like that, or a short sale where the bank makes no representations at all on the property, a standard contract in New York will state that all plumbing, electrical, heating should be in working order. The roof should be delivered free and clear of leaks, things like that. So you want to make sure at your final walkthrough that everything is in working order, that there's no active leaks, things like that. So when you go to a final walkthrough, these are a list of the items that you should look for. And this is actually an email that we send to all of our buyer clients before a final walkthrough, so that they have a checklist of things to look for at the final walkthrough. And this is mainly pertaining to residential properties. You can also use this checklist for co-ops and condos, but some of the items won't be as relevant because it's an apartment and not a house, right? So now one thing to note here before I get started on the list is that as listing agents, so what you have to understand when it comes to final walkthroughs is that if you're working with a buyer's agent, someone who's representing you and you're their client, you hired someone to be your agent, then when you go to the final walkthrough, most likely a good buyer's agent will actually have maybe a checklist like this, or they will help you to make sure and check everything in a detailed way to make sure that everything is working, and that the house is delivered in fully functional and in working order. Now, if you're buying through a listing agent, or let's say for example our team, my wife and I, we're primarily listing agents. So if you were buying directly through us, or if you were buying as a customer, not as one of our clients, or if you were working with an agent, but that agent is not your buyer's agent, you're just their customer. So that's just agency 101. You know, unless you hire an agent to represent you, you're a customer and not a client. And so fiduciary duties to a customer are much different than fiduciary duties to a client. Why do I state this? Is really just because let's say you were buying one of our listings and we go to the final walkthrough. We're representing the seller and we have to do whatever is in our seller's best interest. That's our fiduciary duty. So if you were one of the buyers of one of our properties and we go to a final walkthrough, you shouldn't expect the listing agent or an agent who is not your agent to help you be very thorough and look through every little thing in the property, because that wouldn't be in our seller's best interest, right? So if I'm representing the seller, then most likely I wouldn't be giving you a checklist like this. I wouldn't be going through every little item in the house to check everything, because that's something that a buyer's agent would do, right? Because the buyer's agent is looking out for you and doing everything that's in your best interest. Hopefully that makes sense. I really just say that so that all you potential buyers out there, all you buyers understand how agency works. So if you buy a property directly through a listing agent and you go to a final walkthrough, you know, don't be surprised if they're just there to give access and they're giving you access to the whole house, but they might not be the most thorough with you, and they might not be going in to check every little thing, because that wouldn't be in their seller's best interest. Their job there is to accommodate and give access to the buyers so that you can check everything, but to be thorough at a final walkthrough, that's something that typically you're a buyer's agent. If you hire an agent to represent you and your best interest, then a good buyer's agent will be there with a checklist, and they will actually go through with you to make sure everything's working. And I say this also before going through the list, because we've been to final walkthroughs where the buyer or the agent, the buyer, it would be working with an agent, and I'm not sure if it's their client or their customer, but we've been to final walkthroughs where the buyers or their agent are not very thorough with their walkthrough. And I mean, hopefully everything's okay, but after you close, there's no recourse. So if you're not thorough at your final walkthrough and then you close and you find out that there's a leak under the bathroom sink, or one of your radiators isn't working or something like that, there's really no recourse at that point. Now you're the owner, and so you have to shoulder that expense to fix whatever isn't in working order. So just something important to keep in mind for you. We've also been to final walkthroughs where buyers are very thorough, and they bring up a lot of items. So it can go either way, but this list should help you, whether you're working with a buyer's agent or not. Having a checklist like this is good so that you know what to look at your final walkthrough. All right, so let's jump into the list. So these are just some main items that we tell our buyer clients to look through and to check when they're at a final walkthrough. All right, so number one, make sure all light fixtures are in working order. This sounds like something small, but believe me, you can have one light that's not working, and if it's not working, that means the electrical on that fixture or in that outlet is not working, and so that's an issue, because all electrical should be delivered in working order. So this is just something you want to take note of. So check all the light fixtures, make sure that they're working. Make sure all electrical outlets are in working order. Again, you don't want to move into a place, plug in to charge somewhere, or plug your laptop in, and then you find out that the outlet doesn't work. These are minor things, but still you want to take note of them and bring them up to your attorney before the closing. So go with a phone charger and just check every outlet in the house just to make sure that all the outlets are working. Next thing, run the water and check for leaks under the sinks. So this has happened from time to time where we've seen it, and sometimes the house is empty. The owners might have moved already before they even put the house on the market. A lot of time where the house might be on the market and nobody using it. So turn on the water faucets in the kitchen, in the bathrooms, and open the cabinet under the sink and see if there's any water coming down. Any leaks, any slow drips, or any water coming down under the sink, because that's, again, something that you would want to take note of and mention to your attorney before you actually close on the property. So check for, run the water, check for leaks under the sinks. Make sure all appliances are in working order. So when you go to the final walkthrough, open the fridge, check the freezer, check the oven, turn on all the on the stove. Make sure every lighter is working. Make sure everything is functioning there. Make sure the dishwasher is working. Run it while you're at the final walkthrough, so you can make sure that it's working, that nothing leaks when it's in use. So check all the appliances, washer, dryer. You just want to make sure that everything's working. So that's a good point there. And again, same thing. If something's not working for some reason, something to take note of there. Make sure the garage door and or the garage door openers are in working order. So garage door, just make sure that it's working. If there's a garage door opener, find out where it is and make sure that that's functional. Make sure that all the toilets are flushing. So obviously, this goes without saying, you want to make sure that your bathrooms are in working order and that the toilets are flushing properly. So just make sure that everything's flushing properly there. Check the ceilings, the walls, and the floors for any active leaks or water damage. Again, sometimes these houses go empty for months before closing. So you just want to you want to make sure, inspect the ceilings in every room, check the walls, and check the floors just to see if there looks like there was any kind of water seepage or water leaking into the house. you just want to check. Sometimes there's old water stains, but they can be really old where they were signs from old leaks. So just touch around anywhere that looks like there might have been water damage. And if it's dry, then it might not be an issue. If it's moist, then obviously there might be some active water issue there. This is very uncommon, just so you know, that we don't usually see like water damage or active leaks when we go into a final walkthrough, but you never know. So you just want to keep your eyes peeled. Look at the ceilings, look at the walls, just make sure that everything looks good, and make sure you don't see anything that could show signs of some type of active water coming into the house. The next thing would be, make sure the garbage disposal is in working order. This isn't very common for Queens. Most people here don't have garbage disposals, but if for some reason the property you're buying has a garbage disposal, just make sure that it's working. Make sure all radiators and or the hot water baseboards are in working order. So whenever you go to a final walkthrough, you want to make sure you crank the heat up, and you want to make sure that the heat is working in every room. We're in New York City. It gets cold here in the winter, so the last thing you want is to close on a property and then the winter comes and you find out that one of your radiators isn't working, or one of your rooms isn't heating, one of the hot water baseboards or something like that. So at the final walkthrough, crank up the heat and go by every radiator and every hot water baseboard. You know, just put the back of your hand near it and just make sure that it's heating. We've come across this in the past where one of the radiators wasn't working at the final walkthrough, and so usually in situations like that, when it's something that it's very last minute that it's coming up and something's not working, usually it turns out to be either a money held in escrow and the seller repairs it and then gets that money back once they take care of it, or it can sometimes be a credit at closing to the buyer. So with all these issues, sometimes they turn out in that way. But definitely check all your radiators, all your hot water baseboards to make sure the heat is working properly. If you have forced air heating, then again, just crank up the heat and make sure that everything's working properly at the final walkthrough. If it's applicable, make sure the central AC or the split units are in working order. So here in Queens, central AC isn't so common, but if it is, again, crank the AC up so that you can feel the cold air and make sure that it's working in every room. And then if you have the mini split units, the ductless mini split units, then they usually have remote controls. Just make sure that you test it with every remote, make sure that it's cooling properly. Make sure all windows open and close properly. So this is something, it's not very common where you see where they're not working, but it's something good to check. You know, you just want to make sure that all your windows are working properly. So go by every window, open it, close it, lock it, make sure it locks. And if anything's not working with one of the windows, then you know something else to make note of there. The other thing would be to make sure all debris is removed from the property. So in a standard contract, the house should be delivered clean, broom cleaned, and all debris and any major junk and items like that should be cleared out of the property. This happens from time to time where the owners are scrambling and they get down to the very last minute, and sometimes they leave bulky items in the property. Sometimes they have rooms where they didn't clear everything out. And so if it's big bulky items that are left over, then at the final walkthrough, this is something you want to address with the listing agent, the seller, your buyer's agent, and you want to make sure it's going to be gone by the time you close. Otherwise, this is something you would want to bring up to your attorney. And this just happened to us recently. We did a final walkthrough, and the owner never even went to the attic before, but they haven't gone in a really long time. And the buyer at the final walkthrough checked the attic, and there was a tire there. There was a lot of old debris there, and the owner had to ultimately give a credit for that because it was already the day before closing, and it was a lot of items. It was going to require a clean out company. So Again, this is just the reason why you want to check things like this, but you want to check and make sure all debris is removed from the property and any major big bulky items that would require like a clean out company or something like that. The other thing is to check all the cabinets and the drawers to ensure that everything's been removed. So what you want to do is in any of the drawers of the kitchen, mainly this would be for the kitchen cabinets and any other built-ins that you find, just open them, make sure that they're cleared out, make sure that you don't have a bunch of stuff all in there, because all that stuff should have been cleared out before the final walkthrough. If there is anything there, again, something to note. Now, that's a basic list there of things to check, and these are like the more important items, we would say, that you want to make sure is all in working order, or all of these things that are done at a final walkthrough. And if you're going directly through a listing agent or working with an agent that is not representing you and you're just their customer, that's why you want to have a checklist like this, so that you can take it upon yourself to do all these checks. Now, let's say you go through your final walkthrough and you find items and things that haven't been done, or a leaky faucet, or an appliance that isn't working like it should. You know, these are not things to freak out about, okay? So sometimes we see buyers who nitpick every little thing that they can find, and it causes problems when you get to the closing, or it causes a lot of tension between the seller's attorney, buyer's attorney, sellers, and the buyers. And sometimes we have buyers who don't bring anything up. And so I think the best way to go about it is to be somewhere in the middle. What we always tell our sellers and buyers is to be reasonable. You know, as long as it's something reasonable, then you can always come to an agreement. Okay, everybody usually by the end, everybody wants to close. Everybody wants to close the chapter, close the deal, new owner gets in, and then everybody goes their separate ways. So what you want to do, if you come across any issues there, you bring them up to your agent or to the listing agent, and you bring them up to your attorney. Make sure you take pictures, make sure you take a video. That way you can share it with your attorney so they can see exactly what you're talking about. And it's nothing that has to become a negative kind of thing. It doesn't have to be confrontational. It doesn't have to be like a big deal, right? You just have to bring it up, let your attorney speak with the seller's attorney so that they can come to an agreement. Okay, so if it's an appliance that isn't working, you want to find out why, see if they can take care of it before the closing. If not, with any of these issues, if they're not able to be resolved by closing, then usually what happens is that the attorneys will negotiate money to be held in escrow or a credit being given to the buyer. And the way that works is that if money gets held in escrow, then the seller is responsible for taking care of the issue, and the money that's held in escrow is what they have at risk if they don't do it. So if they take care of it, then once it's taken care of, that money in escrow gets released back to the seller. Now, if they don't take care of the issue and they just, skate off on you, then that money that's held in escrow is what they risk, and that would end up going to the buyer. So that's how money held in escrow works. And a credit, the way that works is if the seller says, look, I can't deal with it, I live out of state, or for whatever case, I can't take care of it, I'll give you a credit of $1,000, or I'm willing to give the buyer a credit for this much. It usually is a negotiation, but whenever it's a credit, it's just a dollar amount that's given back to the buyer at the closing in lieu of whatever items came up, or whatever item it was that became an issue at the final walkthrough. So nothing to really freak out about. You really want to go to your final walkthrough. You want to check everything. You don't want to nitpick on little things like a doorknob missing, or normal wear and tear. You want to make sure that if you do bring anything up, it's something reasonable. So remember, plumbing, heating, electrical, leaks, the roof being free and clear of leaks, things like that are things that would be considered reasonable. okay, appliances working. Things like that are things that would be considered reasonable if for some reason something is not working, or something that's electrical is not fully functional, plumbing, the heat not working in a room. I think you probably can get it that these kind of items are the ones that if you bring up, the seller side should be understanding, and then all you have to do is always try to find a win-win agreement, whether it's money held in escrow and the seller takes care of it, or them giving you a credit in lieu of that issue. So hopefully this helps you guys. I thought about doing this video because we recently had a few final walkthroughs, and I noticed that some buyers are more thorough than others, and being the listing agent, you know, if I see that a buyer is not being thorough at their final walkthrough, I'm not gonna tell them that they should be more thorough, right? Because I'm working for the seller and I have to do what's in the seller's best interest. So I just thought that it's something good to share for all you buyers out there or future home buyers. Make sure when you go to your final walkthrough that you're actually doing a good final walkthrough and checking all the major items, and looking to make sure that everything is delivered in working order so that you don't have issues once you close. All right, sorry for the long video, guys. Hopefully this was informative. Hopefully this gives you some more insight. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out to us anytime at info@queenshometeam.com. I'll put a link in the description to the checklist that we give to our buyer clients, in case you want to use that whenever you go to a final walkthrough. And if you have any ideas or suggestions for future videos, then please drop them in the comments below, because we're always looking for new ideas for content on the channel. All right, thanks as always for tuning in, guys. Stay tuned and take care.